All right. Good evening and welcome to everyone. I'm Lori Danielson with Eastside Audubon, and this is our November program night. I'll be emceeing the event tonight, and our featured speaker is Scott Harris from South Carolina, and he'll be talking about raptors tonight. So, as we get started, I want to acknowledge that Eastside Audubon is on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. I thank these caretakers of this land who have lived here since time immemorial. Secondly, please be aware that closed captions are available in Zoom, and to turn them on or off, look for the CC closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. During our presentation, you can type your questions into the Q&A box, the Q&A icon, and at the end, I will be reading those to Scott for his responses. And finally, as you probably heard, we are recording tonight's presentation and it will be available soon on our website, eastsideaudubon.org. Look for it under the Get Involved and Program Night menus there. So before we get to our featured speaker, the president of Eastside Audubon, John Spilker, has a few things to announce. So, John, I'll give you the mic and mute myself.
Thank you, Lori. And thank you, everyone, for joining. And thank you, Scott, for being part of this tonight. We really appreciate that. I just have a couple of announcements to make. First of all, on December 20th, we're having we're participating in the annual Christmas bird count program that Andy McCormick is hosting. So and we also have a feeder program going on at the same time. Our biggest priority is the CBC. So we would really, really appreciate if you could join us that day and participate on one of I think there are 15 teams or 14, if I'm not mistaken. But if you can't participate because of time or other issues that come up, we do have the bird feeder watch program, and that's something that you can do from the comfort of your home. Look outside. All we ask for is a couple of hours, and you fill in a very simple form of what you think you saw. So we're really hoping this year to get 15 people signed up for the feeder program. And we also need a volunteer to help organize part of the event that day. Look for an announcement. Jeremy Lucas will do a Zoom session on the feeder program and explain some of the do's and don'ts. The second major thing that I would like to announce, which is really appropriate for tonight's talk, is that we are having a Raptor trip on January 17th in the Skagit Valley that will be held by Kevin O'Malley and Barbara Peterson. The event is listed on our website. It's roughly $80, if I'm not mistaken, for non-members, $60 for members. So it should be a great event. We hope to see you there. So thank you, Lori.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you giving out some great, interesting event news to our members and friends. So now to introduce our featured speaker. Scott Harris became an avid birder when he and his wife Randy retired to South Carolina in March of 2020. It was a hobby he never imagined himself participating in, but now he can't imagine living without. He's since become fascinated with mammals and he's sold his photographs around the world. His most recent book, Raptor Quest, Chasing America's Raptors, is the story of his year-long adventure tracking down every species of raptor in the lower 48 states. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. In addition to his writing, Scott also hosts a podcast named Naturally Scott, that focuses on birds, birds, wildlife, and the great outdoors. And he just signed a book deal for his upcoming book titled Why We Love Birds, 52 Birders on Birding. His interests and hobbies include having the largest collection of John Steinbeck's book, Travels with Charlie, in the world, which is really interesting, Scott. Playing the harmonica in a blues band, and he's written more than 50 books in the past 10 years, though the one he's discussing tonight is his first entree into the world of birding and birds. We're honored to have Scott join us tonight, and I will now yield the floor to him.
Well, Lori, John, and everybody, thank you so much for having me here this evening and welcoming me into your homes. I never take that for granted. I have to react to a couple of things that John said and then actually a couple of things Lori said before I can start. John, you mentioned your Christmas bird count upcoming. And yesterday I interviewed Peter Pyle, and some of you may know Peter through the Pyle Guides. Molting and plumage genius that he is. And this year, when he does his Christmas bird count, it will be his 68th consecutive year of doing Christmas bird counts, which I think is a remarkable number. But it's funny that you would bring that up. And then the second thing is, and we can talk about this offline or another day, but I am working on another book called American Safari Zoos Without Fences. And I talk about places you can go in the country to see spectacular raptors and spectacular mammals. And it turns out on January 17th, I will be in Skagit Valley working on my bald eagle chapter. So maybe we can talk. Maybe I could join your group for the day. I don't know if there'll be a focus on bald eagles or not. I have to concentrate on that quite a bit. But nonetheless, I love the coincidence that you guys are having a trip that day and I'm going to be in town that day. And then I always have to mention this, Lori, because you brought up the Travels with Charlie collection. My wife, 46 years of marriage, and she supports everything that I do, which is amazing. But she does like me to point out that the reason I have the largest collection of Travels with Charlie is likely because I have the only collection of Travels with Charlie. She's not confident that anybody else has ever done that, but I do have about 400 different volumes of Travels with Charlie. It's been a blast to collect it. But let's talk about some Raptors. It is my pleasure to be here with you guys tonight and share this adventure. You're looking at the cover of the book, Raptor Quest, the book and the photos in it. And all the photos I'm going to share tonight are photos that I took. And while I enjoyed the adventure and I enjoyed the photography and seeing the Raptors, the really extraordinary part of the whole trip were the people that I met along the way, and I will talk about some of those this evening. So that was an absolute trip for me. Lori mentioned my wife and I retired here. It's almost 6 years ago now. I was not a birder when we moved here, and my bad, by the way. I wish I had been because my wife and I don't know, we've probably been to 40 countries, and we've been to each state at least a couple of times, all before I started birding. I can't imagine how many birds I saw and didn't notice, and how many birders I could have seen if I had been paying attention or known to look. But my bad. When we moved here to South Carolina, we had not been to this area of the state, and we bought the house online. So we were a little bit nervous coming out. And when we came out the first day, the real estate agent was showing us, where we were going to live, which was great. And as we were standing, we live on a lake, and as we were standing on the water's edge, this bald eagle flew across the lake and landed in a pine tree right on the water's edge. I took that as a great sign. I thought that was a really neat deal. And so that just kind of, that was the beginning, the first baby step, although I didn't recognize it at the time. I did get very much into birding, and I very much enjoy it. And we have right outside of my office, we've got a nice screened in porch. And one day, a little while after we were living here, my son and I were sitting outside, and a bunch of birds were flying by. I didn't know what they were. And I said, I got to kind of figure out what these birds are in the backyard. I knew all the birds back in California when we lived there, even though I wasn't a birder. And that was it. It was a casual comment, no big deal. And then a couple of days later, a box shows up from Amazon that I wasn't expecting. I opened the box up, And there are two books in the box. One of them is the Sibley Field Guide to Birds of Eastern North America. And the other one, and you guys may be familiar with it, is Ken Kaufman's Kingbird Highway. And my son had gone online and looked up and said, "Hey, my dad's getting interested in birding. What do you think he ought to read?" And it's kind of fun because I've become friends with Ken through this process. And we were talking earlier this week, and I actually was telling him that story. So next time I see him, I'm going to have him sign that book for me. And it's kind of a neat deal. But I decided that I wanted to write a book about birds. Lori mentioned I do some writing. In the last 10 years, I've published 50 some odd books, but I'm not an ornithologist or a scientist, so I wasn't really sure what I could write. And once again, my son said, "Hey, Dad, remember that movie, The Big Year?" And you guys, probably most of you saw the movie. Came out in 2011. My family watched it together, although not because of the birds, just we like all the actors in the movie. And my son said, "Hey, let's watch the movie again." So we sat down and watched it as a family. And when the movie was over, I turned to my wife. Now, this was about the summer of 2020. And I turned to my wife and I said, "Man, that Big Year, that's a great idea. I think I could do that. I think that would be a lot of fun." And she turned and she looked at me and she goes, "Do you remember the Owen Wilson character that we just watched?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Do you remember how he got divorced?" And so I thought, well, maybe this isn't my best idea. So I wound up backing up because even in the few short months I'd been birding, Raptors had by far become my favorite. And I thought that a Raptor Big Year might be an idea. And so I started to look into that. It might be more manageable, pass the wife test, and give me a focus and something to write about. And by the way, the Jack Black character in this movie was based on a gentleman named Greg Miller. And I've been also fortunate, Greg and I become friends. He's been down in the house and we've hung out and birded together. Terrific, terrific guy. And he loves the fact that Jack Black played him in that movie. So anyway, as I started to research raptors, thinking that a Raptor Big Year might make some sense, um, I discovered that there are generally considered to be 53 raptors that call the lower 48 states home. And we're going to talk about those raptors and which ones they are. And so I thought, well, that's a manageable thing. I can find 53 birds in 12 months. That didn't seem as difficult as it turned out to be. And actually, for me, due to my arrogance and my ignorance, my big year turned out to be 17 months because that first winter through, I had no idea how hard it would be to find some of the winter owls. So I missed some, and I had to wait till winter cycled back around again. So I wound up doing a 17-month big year to find the birds. Like I mentioned, there are 53 generally accepted raptors in the lower 48 states. Now, I say generally accepted for reasons that surprise me. It turns out that unlike, say, hummingbirds or gulls or corvids or warblers, there is no accepted scientific definition of what a raptor or a bird of prey is. There are a number that have been offered, but all of them, all these different ideas have holes in them, and they'll either exclude birds that are usually considered to be raptors, or they'll include birds that might generally not be considered raptors. And so I am reminded in 1964, Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart was asked to define pornography. And he famously answered that he could not define it, but he knew it when he saw it. And I believe that's the same thing with raptors. I think even non-birders know what a raptor looks like. Certainly they know what an owl looks like. And, so that's kind of what we've gone with. There is some controversy about these 53. For example, in my own world, if I was to do this again, I would not include the vultures. I wouldn't include the black and the turkey and the California condor. Don't get me wrong. I love all of them. Matter of fact, I think they're probably the single most important little family of birds in the country for the disease prevention and the carrion cleanup and all the things they do. I just don't think they're raptors. And then on some of the others, there's a little bit of controversy. You guys may be familiar because you get them on occasion in Washington, but Harlan's hawks, there's a submittal now, a proposal to break that out. And instead of having it as a subspecies of a red-tailed hawk, forgive me, to have it as his own species, which, by the way, it has been lumped and split 3 times over the years. So it is just a matter of politics and the science of the moment, whether it is a species or a subspecies. Some of the birds, like say a hook-billed kite, is more of an occasional visitor from Mexico, although they do breed here every once in a while. But you generally only find them in the southeast corner of Texas. And then some of the winter owls, like a northern hawk and a snowy and a great gray. In truth, those birds just come down here in the winter, well, for our warm winters to get out of the boreal forest. I think they're probably more Canadian than US, but nonetheless, this is America, so we claim them. And in the end, we have 19 owls and 31 diurnals and 3 vultures. And I acknowledge that a couple of the owls are diurnals, but I needed nice, convenient boxes to fit everything in. So the 31 diurnals are what you would normally think of: your hawks, your eagles, your osprey, your falcon, your harrier, and owls are owls. So there we go. This is my canvas, the 48 lower states. Now I know that we have 50 states. I'll talk about the other 2 for a moment. There are no birds, no raptors that are endemic to Alaska. There are no raptors that are found in Alaska that we don't find in the lower 48 states. You do on occasion, of course, get a vagrant that comes through, generally across the Bering Straits. That did not happen during my 17 months. And then as far as Hawaii goes, I just chose not to count it and to concentrate on the 48. But Hawaii does have 3 raptors of their own. They have a barn owl, same barn owl we have, no differences. They've got a short-eared owl, which will probably become its own species relatively soon. It is a pure diurnal owl. It is currently a subspecies of our continental short-eared owl, but it's got different vocalization and it's got different eating and feeding habits. And there have been some papers presented, and I would think in the next couple of years that will be its own species. The third one is a true endemic. It can only be found on the Big Island of Hawaii. It is a hawk, and you can only imagine how many months they must have spent coming up with the name of it, but it is known as a Hawaiian hawk. And the Hawaiian hawk is a true endemic. We don't get it here in the States. We don't find it anywhere else, and it's just on the Big Island, not even on any of the other islands. So this was the canvas I went with, the 48, and 20 of the 53 raptors can be found in all 48 states. Now, obviously, the numbers increase or decrease based on season and migration and habitat and all those good things. And by the way, the statistics that I'm going to share with you this evening, and I try not to share so many as to put you to sleep, since a lot of you are at home and in comfortable chairs. But all the statistics come from eBird, and they all come from, what would it be, 2016 to 2021. Those are the years. And so there certainly are things that have perhaps changed since or were different before, but I figured a 5-year block was a good thing to discuss. So 20 of the 53 can be found in all 48. 2 of them have been found in 47 of the 48, and they have skipped Louisiana. I don't know if they don't like Cajun food or if they don't speak French, but whatever it is, the northern goshawk, now known as the American goshawk, that changed a year or 2 ago, and the northern saw-whet owl have not been spotted in Louisiana. There is an interesting story behind the northern saw-whet owl that I'll share with you. Scott Weidensaul, that I'm sure a lot of you know of through his books, magnificent writer. He's also spent more than 30 years studying northern saw-whet owls. And it is his belief, and he says, to put it mildly, that John James Audubon is an unreliable narrator. And now Audubon claims that he spotted a northern saw-whet owl in Louisiana and that he painted it there. And actually, for a while, it was named the Acadian owl because of that. Scott, through his research, doesn't believe that that occurred. But maybe it's apocryphal, maybe it's a legend, whatever it is. But there you go, the story of the northern saw-whet in or out of Louisiana. The snowy owl has only skipped 2 states, Arizona and New Mexico. And 5 of our raptors are typically found in 3 states or less. That would be the Aplomato falcon, the ferruginous pygmy owl, the whiskered screech owl, the hook-billed kite, and the white-tailed hawk. And all 5 of those, while typically found in 3 states or fewer, are most easily and commonly found in Texas. As it turns out, Texas is the best state in the nation for number and variety of raptors. It's just spectacular if you're out trying to see all the raptors. And so it is the highlight for those. People ask me about my trip, where I went, and how long I was gone, and what I did. I did 7 different cross-country trips driving, and I was blessed, by the way. I bought a new truck for the trip. All those trips I did by myself. And so I drove quite a few miles. I never got a ticket. I never broke down. I never even got a flat tire. It was an amazing trip from that point of view, with a single exception, which I will share with you in a moment. I did 13 round trip flights, but because I was going to such small little towns around the country, and because I start in Greenville, South Carolina, which is a small airport, I took 50 legs of flights on these 13 different trips. People have a lot of complaints about airlines. I understand that. But I will tell you that on my 50 legs of flights, all 50 of them took off on time. 49 of the 50 landed on time. And on the trips where I did take luggage, I never once lost a piece of luggage. So I had remarkable good fortune. The one exception to that is I was flying from Houston down to Harlingen, Texas, my 4th trip to Texas to try to find the hook-billed kite. I had driven there twice and flown there once previous. And this was a late night flight. We left Houston about, 10:30 at night or something. 45-minute flight down to Harlingen. And we were in the air about 45 minutes, and the pilot comes on and he says, "Hey, I got some bad news. There is really quite a bit of fog over the Harlingen airport, and we're not sure we're going to be able to land. But we've got about 15 minutes worth of fuel left, so we're going to circle around for a little bit. And if we can't get underneath that fog, we'll turn around and go back to Houston." Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm not an ornithologist or a scientist. I'm also not a pilot or a mathematician. But if it took 45 minutes of fuel to get there, I would imagine it would take close to that to get back. So the 15-minute thing was disconcerting. A couple minutes later, somebody must have said something, because the pilot came back on and he said, "What I should have said was, we have 15 minutes worth of fuel to play with. We've got plenty of fuel to get back to Houston," which is what we did. Caught the first flight out the next morning and got my hook-billed kite, which made for a great trip. I was on the road for 25 weeks. I visited 34 states, traveled well over 100,000 miles. These are the states that I drove to most often. Well, obviously I drove through states, but these were the states where I went most often. These are the states where I took flights. These are the states that I visited, the 34 states. And this is the one odd thing that happened in my car. I had flown to Kalispell, Montana, to look for a snowy owl that had been seen there 3 consecutive days. So I jumped on a plane and went up there, rented a car, landed Monday morning. Monday afternoon, I went and looked for that bird, didn't find it. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I went each morning and afternoon, never found it. Didn't see it again on eBird. I thought, oh, great. It was there 3 days in a row and now it's gone. So Friday, I just didn't want to go back and look at it again. It had been seen at a small airport outside of Kalispell called Flathead Lake Sky Ranch Airport, and a couple of dirt roads. The main dirt road was one called Manning Road. And so this Friday morning, I thought, you know what? I knew there was a great place about 2 hours west of Kalispell to find raptors. So I got up well before dawn, drove out there, and got there right at dawn and started looking for raptors. I was there 2 hours and 120 minutes. Obviously, you guys know 2 hours, 120 minutes. But it's significant because in that 120 minutes, I saw 119 raptors. It was the most spectacular couple hours of looking for raptors, or looking at raptors, I've ever had, ever, in my 6 years of doing this. 15 great horned owls. I mean, it was just amazing. And when it was done, I wanted to head back, take one more afternoon look at the little airport, and then catch a flight home that night. So I typed in Manning Road into my GPS the way you do, and it came up, gave me a couple alternatives. I pushed the first one, which is what I do 19 times out of 20. And then I didn't pay any attention. Every once in a while, the car would say, make a left or make a right or go 17 miles. And that's what I would do. But I wasn't focused on anything except the book I was listening to. Suddenly I looked up and I'm in traffic. And I look up and I see this sign that you're looking at, welcome to Canada. That was not where I wanted to go. Canada was due north of where the Raptors were. I needed to go due east to get back to Kalispell. So I was right at the border. I couldn't turn around. There's fences on both sides. There's no way to get around, but not a big deal. I would just tell the Border Patrol what was going on, and it was a 100-yard U-turn to make it back into the States. I didn't have a passport because I hadn't expected to go into Canada that day. And, we hear all the time about how great Canadians are, how polite and pleasant and welcoming and warm and empathetic they are. I found none of that to be true. I got to that little gate. I told the guy that I didn't have my passport. All I wanted to do was the 100-yard U-turn, go back into the States. And whatever he thought I was doing, it wasn't good. They spent 3.5 hours stripping my car down, looking for, I don't know, guns or drugs or whatever they were looking for. And when they were done, they said, all right, go ahead and put your car back together. And so I did that. And they shared a building with the U.S. Border Patrol. And so he said, just do the U-turn, tell them what happened, they'll let you back in. So I did the U-turn, told the U.S. guy what happened. He didn't believe me any more than the Canadian. They spent 2.5 hours stripping my car. So 6 hours I spent at the border before I made it back in the States. And by the way, what happened was, it turns out that there is a Manning Road in Alberta, Canada, that was also 2 hours away from where I was. So when it came up, I just assumed it was the Manning Road I wanted and hit yes, and that's what happened. Anyway, I raced back to Kalispell. I got there just a few minutes before dark, hit the correct Manning Road, and saw a car up on the right-hand side. And again, it's just a little dirt road. And you guys know, if there's a rare bird or an unusual bird in an area and you see a car on the side of the road, especially a dirt road or out in a forest or a park or something, the odds are they might be on the bird you're looking for. So I pulled up behind this car, got out, came over. It was below zero. It was freezing cold, literally. Knocked on the window. The guy rolled down the window and I said, hey, is there any chance you've seen the snowy owl? And he pointed to his right and he said, you mean this one? And less than 50 feet away was this snowy owl. Now, I think this is a spectacular photograph, not because I took it. Do not misunderstand me. I'm going to say this about a couple other birds, actually all owls tonight, that the photographs are spectacular, but it's because of the bird and because the bird is there, and let me take the shots. This bird was sitting, you can kind of see the little shingles. He was sitting on a shed in a guy's backyard. He sat there for a few minutes as the sun was setting, and it was just amazing to sit and look at this bird and get these shots. And those are, I mentioned I would explain to you why I prefer raptors, or why I think I do. One, because you can get them to sit for a while. Raptors are, oftentimes they'll sit for 23 hours. They'll hunt and they're good to go. And so you can get these photographs. And the other thing is the eyes. I love the eyes of raptors. And you look into this snowy owl's eyes, and it's just, to me, it's just amazing. And then it took off and flew away. So I headed to the real airport in Kalispell, managed to catch my flight and get home. It was a pretty cool deal. I went down to Texas to the King Ranch. I was looking for a ferruginous pygmy owl, which are not easy to find in this country. Not impossible, but not easy. But the most common place to find them is at King Ranch in Texas. If you're not familiar with King Ranch, it is massive. It is 825,000 acres. And to give you an idea, the entire state of Rhode Island is 777,000 acres, 50,000 acres less than this single ranch. Knowing that ferruginous pygmy owls were most common there, I signed up to take a one-day birding trip. You have to sign up for something to get on the ranch, a corporate retreat or hunting or whatever it is, or a birding trip, which is what I did. And there was another two people that were on the trip with me. A young man named Frank Fabro, who was a student at UC Davis, an ornithology student, and his mom. Great people. We spent the day together, and they'll come up again in just a couple of minutes. So we jump in a van with a guy named Tom, who was the guide and the driver, and we head off into the ranch. And about an hour into the ride, we hear a ferruginous. Pretty good listen, pretty good call. I mean, distinct, and we knew right away what it was. We were all looking for it, but I wasn't thrilled because I didn't want to count that. I don't like herd onlys, and we were going to spend the day anyway, so it didn't really matter. But about an hour later, we get a look at one that had just flown by. We didn't see it take off, nor did we see it land. It just shot by. You could tell what it was, but it wasn't a great look. Another hour goes by. So we're 3 hours into what I think was a 6 hour tour. I want to say 6 a.m. to noon. And we're out in the middle of some grasslands, and the guide says, "Hey, let's pull over, and there's a picnic table there. Obviously, this is a part of their normal routine, and we'll stop and have breakfast." So we do. We're in this grassland, but we're also at the fringe of a bit of a forest. And as I sit down at the picnic table and we're unpacking the four of us, I look across the table, and I would say 30 feet away from me is this ferruginous pygmy owl. Now, again, I think this is a magnificent picture. And again, not because I took it, but look at the bird. Look at how gorgeous that bird is. And the yellow and black eyes like the snowy owl. That bird stayed. We had breakfast. We were there probably 30 minutes. And that bird stayed the whole time. It preened. It actually fell asleep. It never appeared agitated or nervous. And we got to spend some time with it, which was, to me, amazing. I'd seen a bunch of them in Central America on trips to Costa Rica or Panama, but this is the only one, actually, up until today, this is the only one, that day was the only ones that I've seen. And I really treasure that time that we had down there. Now, interestingly enough, while we were out at the ranch, about midday, we started to see some white-tailed hawks. We probably saw a dozen of them over the course of the day. And the guide, Tom, was telling us that in Texas, their nickname is the Firehawk, which I did not know. And he explained that the nickname came from the fact there are a lot of grassland fires, obviously, in Texas. And as those fires are racing across the prairies, the animals that can are outrunning them or going down into burrows, or the ones that are able to take to the air, which is predominantly insects. White-tailed hawks have learned this, and they will come along the trailing edge of a fire with the smoke and wait till, and mostly grasshoppers, come through the smoke. And when they do, they pluck them out of the air and they eat them just like a Mississippi kite or a swallowtail kite. So they are nicknamed down there the Firehawk. Beautiful, beautiful bird. I mentioned the young man from UC Davis. I would bring him back. I am now. When I told him about the book I was writing, he said, "Hey, if you want some help getting on a spotted owl, last summer my internship at college was working for a lumber company. And my job was to find spotted owl nests, report them back to the timber company so they can cordon them off about a quarter mile square around the nests, and then they wouldn't pull the timber from there. So that was my job. I won't be doing that again this summer, but I'm pretty sure I can get you back on some nests. So give me a call if you want to do that." So I did, and he was extremely generous. He had to drive 3 hours to meet me, and because we were going to meet at 5 a.m., he went out the night before and slept in his car. And so we connected. It was pitch black when we started walking. We're walking through a pretty narrow trail. It wasn't even a full deer trail, I don't think. And we're hiking for about an hour, and the sun's just starting to come up in this national forest in California. And he turns, he says, "Okay, I think we just need to go right and maybe go about a half mile, and we should be able to find a spotted owl nest." Well, I look to my right, and it is just pure fauna. It is trees and bushes and plants and grasses. I have no idea how we're going to get through this. Suddenly he reaches down, and I hadn't seen these before, but he reaches down to his right thigh, and he unstraps two machetes. And he hands me a machete, and he said, "We got to start hacking." So we started hacking our way through the woods, and I thought we went about 15 or 20 miles. He says it was well under a mile, but whatever it was, we spent some time getting through. And suddenly we break into this opening. And the opening to me appeared to be a perfect 60-foot round. I mean, it was just, there was this opening, and there was a single dead tree in the middle of the opening. And it looked to me like someone had taken, a 30-foot rope and drawn a crop circle and cut everything out except this one tree in the middle. It was a very odd thing. Frank couldn't explain it either. And Perched on this tree on a dead snag was this amazing spotted owl. Just a gorgeous bird. So there were a couple of stumps there. We each sat down on the stumps. We had brought breakfast. We unpacked our little sack lunch breakfast, and we're watching this spotted owl. We stayed for an hour, took all the photographs we wanted. Once again, the bird never appeared agitated or upset that we were there. It preened, it didn't go to sleep, but it did drop down and catch a mouse while we were there. We got to see that. And it was just amazing. After about an hour, we thanked the bird for being so gracious, and we backed out of that 60-foot clearing and hacked our way back to the little deer trail. And when we got to the deer trail, this was waiting for us, this little fledge. And it turns out there were a pair of fledges. And after we'd been there for a couple of minutes, an adult spotted came back. And Frank was convinced it was the adult that was in the 60-foot opening with us. But nonetheless, for a moment there, we had two fledges and a single adult spotted owl, which aren't too easy to find. And of course, they're really controversial right now with the barred owls, and the barred owls are predating the spotted, and there's the idea that we should be slaughtering the barred owls, and whole separate controversy for a whole separate conversation. But nonetheless, it felt like a gift to spend time with them. Coming right back here to the home front, I mentioned we live on a lake called Greenwood Lake. And one day in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day, my son and I took our pontoon boat out on the lake. We sat down or we lied down on the bench seats, lit up cigars, and we were just talking, the way fathers and sons do if you're really fortunate, and I am. And suddenly overhead flew two swallowtail kites. Managed to snap this picture. I wasn't really a photographer at the time. I didn't buy my first camera until after I started birding. And these two swallowtails flew about 20 feet overhead. It was just remarkable. And so we're pretty excited about it. And I'd made a couple of friends here in the local birding club, and I sent them text messages, and they wrote back, said, "Oh, Scott, you're new and enthusiastic, and you're wrong. There's not been swallowtail kites seen over the lake before, and so it must be something else, and we'll have to figure out what it is." So I just took a couple of pictures and texted them to them, and they wrote back and said, "My God, this swallowtail kite." About an hour later, they were out here, and took them out on the boat, and sure enough, we found them again, and the first time they've been spotted here. But it was a neat thing to see them. I think they're gorgeous. They remind me of like Fred Astaire in a tuxedo. And that's the one that pushed me over to the edge to start writing the book. And that's why this is the first chapter in the book. There's a chapter in the book on each of the 53 birds, and then there's some scattered essays that I wrote. But the swallowtail kite is first. And by the time we got back to the dock, we had come up with the name Raptor Quest. So that was pretty cool. We do get swallowtail kites about 75 miles north of here coming through on migration, at least the 5 seasons that I've been involved. And normally it's about 25 swallowtails and 15 Mississippis. They roost together, they hunt together. And there's a farmer up there that has a field, and the birding club convinced him, and he generously was convincible, to not till his fields until after migration. And so the insects, especially grasshoppers, collect there. And he's kind enough to allow us onto his gated property. You can set up for the day. You can bring a sack lunch and a chair and sit and watch and take pictures of these magnificent birds all day long. So it is quite a gift. Small owls can be challenging to find. This is a boreal owl that you're looking at here. There's a gentleman named Scott Rashid. Some of you may have heard of him. Scott is a small owl expert, especially the 4 small owls that call Rocky Mountain National Park home, at least for part of the year. He has studied them for 27 straight years. I was introduced to him during this project. He invited me out. He does a banding station every year from September 15th until the last day of October. This year being the first year he didn't finish because of the government shutdown. It was only open about 3 or 4 days, although my wife and I were fortunate enough to make it there the first day. But I went out and I spent a week with Scott, and he was kind enough to get me on the 4 small mountain owls. This is the boreal owl, which was very cool. Northern pygmy owl, which is Scott's favorite, and one of the diurnal owls. And just a badass little bird. There's just no other way to put it. And then a northern saw-whet owl, which looks a lot like a northern or like a boreal owl. The biggest difference being the beak color. They're dark gray or black on a saw-whet, and they are white or tan on a boreal owl. That's the quickest way to tell the difference. The fourth one is a flammulated owl, and of the 53, it is my only herd only. We went out 4 straight nights looking for it. We heard it distinctly and clear every night. We chased it through moonless forests in pitch black trying to find it. Never did. So I've still never seen a flam. I've heard them multiple times. I've been back 3 years, last 3 years, including this September. Just wasn't able to get on it, but I will, and I will convert it from a herd only to a scene. But anyway, Scott is one of those guys who was just great. He's published a number of books, including one called Small Mountain Owls. And so if you get a chance to look at that, please do. Just because I like to support Scott if I can, because he was so generous. Cooper's Hawk. This is up on Commissary Ridge in Wyoming. And during the season, they have a banding station and a hawk watch up there. And I got invited to go spend some time up there. And so I did. I drove out from South Carolina. I was given the directions. I got all the way there to the mountain where it was. And now I'm on a dirt road and I'm looking for another dirt road. And the directions just didn't work. And there's no Wi-Fi. There's no cell service. There's nothing. I can't contact the people on the top of the mountain. I'm not really sure what to do. So I'm driving around for over an hour. And then finally I stumble across a gate, beautiful gate, timber gate. I let myself in, close it behind me, drive about a mile down a dirt road, and I come up on this amazing house. Got to be 6,000 square feet, timber built. I park the truck and get out, and I go to the front porch, and the doors, there's 2 front doors. They're both about 10 feet tall. They're both about 4 feet wide, to give you an idea of the size of the house. Massive, intimidating, thick, heavy doors. I knock on the door, and a minute or so later, slowly one of the doors starts to open, and standing in front of me is a woman somewhere between 50 and 150 years old. She's not 5 feet tall. She certainly doesn't weigh 100 pounds. And she looks to me like she's made out of leather. And she looks up at me and she smiles, and it lights up the whole valley that we're standing in. Just a gracious, generous woman. And she looks at me, and before I can say anything, she says, "I bet you hear about the birds." And I said, "I am." She goes, "Yep, about every 3 weeks, someone comes up here and they're trying to find that because they never give good directions." She said, "So here's the deal. You come in the house, you have a glass of milk, I'll make you a sandwich, you tell me a couple of stories, and then I'll give you the directions." So that's what we did. I went in the house, had a glass of milk, had a sandwich, told her some stories. She was kind and generous and warm. She gave me perfect directions, and I made it up to the top of the mountain. You had to have 4-wheel drive, which fortunately I did. Right as I got there, they had caught a Cooper's hawk in their net. So they let me take care of it and get it out and hold it. And then when they were done doing the weighing and measuring and banding, they let me release it and get this photograph. So that was a pretty cool deal. I love Cooper's hawks, but the highlight of that day was the woman. She was just so cool. This is another shot of a Cooper's hawk. And once again, I just have to stress the eyes. This, the orange and black compared to the yellow and black. But my God, I just think it's amazing. I just love it. Red-tailed hawk, one of our more common raptors, especially if you don't count the vultures. And you can find them in all 48 states. And they are beautiful. I've heard people say, "Oh, it's just a red tail." I don't get it, because I look at this bird and I think it's magnificent. I want to share with you a couple of stories. One which most of you are probably familiar with, the other one maybe not. The first one is, anytime you're watching a movie or a TV show or an ad or anything where there's a bald eagle and you hear that fierce war cry, that is a red-tailed hawk. That is not a bald eagle. The sound that a bald eagle makes sounds more like something it should be hunting than the sound it should be making. So movies don't want that squeaky, high-pitched sound, so they throw in a red-tailed hawk, which is a great idea. The other one that I wanted to share with you, and this goes back to 1952, when Dwight D. Eisenhower was elected president. One of the things that Eisenhower pushed was an interstate highway system, which he did get through Congress, and which was eventually completed in 1994, long after president died. But he put this thing together for two reasons. One was factual. There was a huge migration of Americans from the East Coast to the West Coast following World War II, and he wanted to make it easier and safer and faster to get from the East to the West Coast. There is also a story, and it may be apocryphal, that he wanted to have some long, straight stretches of concrete so that if we went to war with Russia, which seemed like a good possibility in 1952, that we would have places to land fighter planes and bombers. Fortunately, we never needed to do that, but nonetheless, that's the story behind it. Now, what the unintended consequence was, and a great consequence for birders and red-tailed hawks, is by doing this, we created amazing red-tailed hawk habitat. We went through and mowed down forests, and we can debate, how good of an idea that was or wasn't, but nonetheless, we did that. And now along most highways, we keep areas mowed and low grass. And what that does is create perfect habitat for red-tailed hawk favored foods. Small mammals, small birds, reptiles, sometimes amphibians, lots of munching for red-tailed hawks. The only thing missing was perches, so we added those perches. We call them telephone poles, but for red-tailed hawks, they are perches. There are very few places you can go in this country where you don't see a reasonable amount of red-tailed hawks. This one's from our front yard. We've got a bird sanctuary out there, and you can see the fall colors, which I love, and the red-tailed hawk. I just think it's a magnificently beautiful bird, and it's one of my favorites. Another bird that benefited greatly from mankind is the peregrine falcon. Now, first we tried to kill it with DDT, and we don't have time to tell the whole story. Most of you know it, but DDT was a chemical that farmers used, and eventually what it did was weaken the eggs of some of our larger birds like peregrines and pelicans and bald eagles, and then the eggs would shatter, and we were losing the population, and it looked like they were going to be wiped out. But it was a single source problem, DDT, so we were able to ban it. You compare that to the problems we have today, which are cats that are pets that kill about 1.5 billion birds a year, large skyscrapers with the lights where birds are smashing into the windows, cars, habitat loss, all kinds of things. No easy solutions to the dramatic reduction in birds going on in this country. But with peregrine falcons and bald eagles, DDT was a single source problem. We banned it. It worked its way through the system. The birds came back. The cool thing about peregrines is you can now find them in every major city in the country. They are known to many people as the urban falcon. And there's a couple reasons for that. One, peregrine falcons are cliff dwellers, cliff nesters. And the sheerer the cliff, the happier they are because the less access from potential predators. And what do big cities have? Skyscrapers, which to peregrine falcons seem like a great place to nest. And as a matter of fact, in a number of cities in the country, there is a public-private combination where they are building nesting boxes for peregrine falcons, and do that for two reasons. One, because it brings tourists in, it brings birders. People go to New York City to see all the peregrine nests that are under the bridges, and there's a number of cities where the peregrines have nested in church spires, and it's just beautiful. So it brings in tourists. And the other is it is a combination of benefits. Peregrines love pigeons, and most big cities have pigeons, but nobody else seems to really love pigeons. So the city fathers and mothers are very pleased to have peregrines try to reduce and scare away the pigeons. So it's a neat combination for everybody. Beautiful birds. This one's from Torrey Pines down in San Diego. There's a pair that nests there. There are two pair that nest there in Torrey Pines State Park every year, only 50 feet from the surf line, and they successfully fledge every year. It's just fantastic. I try to go down. I was there. This is a shot from last year. I mentioned the bald eagle. That's another bird that has benefited greatly from man because of getting rid of DDT. Now, you guys have Skagit Valley, which I've only been there once, but as I understand it, is maybe the key part or the key place to see bald eagles in this country, combining number and beauty and accessibility, which is why I can't wait to get there in January. But another great place to see bald eagles is the Conowinga Dam in Maryland, 45 minutes northeast of Baltimore on the Susquehanna River. In the fall, the shad run upriver, and they have to go through the dam. So it's different than, say, in the Northwest, where You've built stair steps and stuff for the salmon because people care about salmon. Nobody cares about the shad. And so they get knocked unconscious or killed as they go through the dam. And bald eagles, which are surface hunters, go through and pick them off. And you can get 200 to 300 bald eagles collecting in a very small area. And it's a great place to take pictures and learn how to take shots. You get adults and juveniles and aerial battles, and it is just a fantastic thing. That's a shad right there in that bald eagle. And what's really cool is the dam is closed to the public 11 months out of the year for safety and terrorism concerns or whatever. But they actually open it up for the month that this is occurring. They've got a walkway that goes along the river for a few hundred yards and a little short 3-foot chain link fence, and you're about 20 feet above the river. And they open it up to the public, and you can get there at dawn. And I've been on multiple trips there and settled in and bring a chair and bring an ice chest and sit for the day. And you take as many pictures as you want. And you meet other birders and other photographers, or just people who, are fascinated by seeing a couple hundred bald eagles at one time. Osprey are birds you can find all over the country, but the place you can find the largest concentration is Sebastian Inlet, which is on the east coast of Florida, 45 minutes north of Vero Beach. And it's a great place also in the fall, just like the bald eagles at Conowinga Dam. So there you get the mullet, and that's what you're looking at here is a mullet. So the Sebastian Inlet State Park is actually cut in half by the water inlet. So there's a bridge that goes over it. I don't know what they call it, Florida 1 or, whatever that road is that goes north and south along the eastern coast there of Florida. And so on either side, they have about a 200-yard cement walkway that goes out for photographers and fishermen and birders and just casual walkers. And then there's, probably about 150 yards in between those walkways. And that's where the mullets come rushing in at high tide and low tide. And that's where dozens, not hundreds like at the Conowinga Dam, but dozens of osprey collect and go down fishing for the mullet. And it is just amazing. I love osprey. I think they might be the coolest of all birds. And of all the raptors, I'm going to give you a couple reasons why. It's personal. It's completely subjective, but nonetheless, I support it with a couple of facts. Number one, I love the fact they're sushi eaters. I'm a sushi eater, and since that's their diet almost exclusively, if my wife would allow, that would be my diet almost exclusively. They're the only migratory bird that carries a lunch with it when they leave on migration. So, like most birds, they try to double their body weight. They shrink their organs, or the organs even disappear, and they put on as much fat for energy as they possibly can. The difference is the last thing an osprey does before it takes off on migration is grab one last fish, and as you guys know, flips it head forward, breaks the water, takes off, does that dog shake to get the water off, and off it goes. Maybe it's going across the Gulf of Mexico for 600 miles, but it carries its lunch with it, which is just so cool. The other thing they do that is unique among all birds is that when they leave the first year, so here, I'm not sure what the timing is in Washington, but here in South Carolina, our ospreys show up in March and they leave the first week of September and head south. First year fledges that do that do not return 6 months later. They skip a cycle and they stay 18 months. Ornithologists do not know why, but that is what they do. And then that second cycle through may be driven by sexual tension and motivation, but they head back north and then spend the rest of their life doing the once a year south, once a year north. But that first year, they skip the northern return. And then the last thing is they are the only diving raptor, the only bird that takes fish from underwater. A bald eagle, for example, is a pure surface hunter, but an osprey can dive up to 3 feet deep. And the big reason for that is they're the only raptor whose eyes adjust for refraction. So even when they're in a stoop at 50 miles an hour, their eyes know exactly where that fish is underwater, which is a pretty cool deal. That's my pitch for ospreys. There we go. Great gray owl. This one was in Yellowstone National Park. I go every January. I can be almost by myself in the park in January. There's just nobody there because it's cold. This particular day, it was minus 25 degrees and it was snowing. For those of you that are photographers, you know that you can't have the windows up in the car and you can't have the heater on, because if you do and you open the car door, the condensation gets on the lenses and you lose your shot. So I'm driving around in minus 25-degree weather. I've got an inch and a half of snow on the floorboards. I get pulled over by a ranger. There's only one road open in Yellowstone in the winter, and it goes through Lamar Valley. And the ranger asked in this particular year, what are you doing here? And I explained I'm looking for megafauna and raptors. And he said, well, I can get you on a great gray owl. I said, great. So I followed him for a half an hour, and sure enough, he put me on this great gray, and I got to watch it for a while. This picture does not do it justice, but it was cold, it was snowing. I apologize, it was the best I could do, but it was amazing to watch. And I got to watch it hunt and drop down. And if you don't know, a great gray owl can hear a small mammal, like a mole or a vole or a mouse, up to 2 feet under snow, can hear the heartbeat. And you can see the huge dish on its face. And sure enough, I got to watch it dive and hunt twice, once successfully. I don't know what it pulled out, but some little unfortunate squeaky animal came out. But pretty cool thing. For those who love owls, if you want to see winter owls, the best place in the country to see them, these are some great horns, but the best place in the country to see them is Sax-Sim Bog in Minnesota. On a great day, and I mean a great day, these don't come up often, but they do. You can see a great gray owl, a boreal, a snowy, a northern hawk, a northern saw-whet, a barred, and a great horned owl. No guarantees, obviously, but you've got a shot at seeing all 7 of those on any given day in the winter at Sax-Sim Bog. People ask if I chased rarities. I don't chase non-raptor rarities, but I will go after raptor rarities. This is a roadside hawk that showed up in Texas. Beautiful bird. I'd seen it in Costa Rica. Love the bird. And every few years one shows up in Texas. So I went down and saw this. And the year before, there was a bat falcon down there. I got that as well, again in Southeast Texas, which is kind of a highlight. This next picture is a terrible photograph. I will warn you in advance. I apologize in advance, but I will explain why. And it's part of the rarity conversation. This is a Steller sea eagle in Maine. And the picture you're looking at is taken from the Arrowsick Bridge, which the 2 winters when it showed up in Maine, that's where you could see it from. But it was a mile up the river, literally a full mile upriver, right at the bend of the river. The Stellers would stay there with the largest collection I saw was 13 bald eagles. So that's why the picture's so bad. That's the best shot I could get from a mile away. But if you haven't seen this bird, if you weren't fortunate enough to see it, it is an unbelievable bird. It's massive. What you're looking at there is it had just killed a Canada goose. I mean, imagine taking a Canada goose out of the sky. And that little bird in front of it, that's a bald eagle. Now, a bald eagle, full-grown bald eagle, can weigh up to 13 pounds. But a Steller sea eagle is more than 50% bigger. They can get up to 23 pounds. They're just huge, massive animals. And I went both winters it was there. I went the first winter, 4 days, never saw it. Went the second winter, I was able to go for 3 days. I saw it every day. It was just fantastic. And if you can see it in this crappy photo, if you can get an idea, look at its beak. Its beak is huge, just huge. And its pad and its talons are bigger than my hand. They are absolutely massive. It's a pretty cool thing to see. Northern hawk owl was my 53rd bird out of 53. I had just been up in Montana in the winter, and I had seen a gyrfalcon, and I was home, and I got a call, and I was told that there was a northern hawk owl in Montana, and I needed to get up and see it. So it was an odd thing. The people were nice enough to call and tell me that it was there, but they wouldn't tell me where. And you guys may know that eBird ghosts a lot of the raptors. It will not show you exactly where it are. It gives you that purple box. So it's identified generally about county size because people poach the birds. So they don't want people to know. So, but I had to go and try to find it. So I jump on a plane. I land back in Montana. I drive about 3 hours to get to Wise River, which is a tiny, tiny little town. And just before I get to the town, there's a dirt road. And I figure, well, I might as well start looking. It's late afternoon, but I'll take a peek. I head down this dirt road. Dirt road's 10, 12 feet wide, one car wide. And after I'd gone maybe 3/4 of a mile, I see a couple cars up on the side of the road. I'm thinking it can't be this easy. But it was. I pulled up behind the car. There were three people, two from one to the other. And they're both, all three people are out. And as soon as I slowly open my door, they're putting their finger up, telling me to be quiet. And they point. And across the dirt road, there's a telephone pole, no longer used, no wires or anything going to it. And perched on top of this telephone pole is this stunning northern hawk owl. I thought, my God, you got to be kidding me. There it is. There's number 53. And I watch and we stay there and we're there an hour and a half maybe. And we went down and hunted a couple of times. That's where I got this shot. And it was really, really a cool deal. The next morning I got up and I drove back to the same place. I got there right at dawn. There was nobody else there. And as the sun, as we got enough light where I could see, I looked up and sure enough, the bird was still on top of that pole. That was freezing cold. It was snowing and it was cold. I was the only one there. And I didn't even grab my camera. I left my camera in the car and I slid down the side of the car till I got to the rear bumper. And then I just leaned against that bumper. And I was there that morning for roughly 2 hours. And that bird did not leave the pole. It just stayed there. It would stare at me. It would preen. It would look around. It didn't hunt. It certainly wasn't afraid of me. And then suddenly at about the 2 hour mark, it dropped off that pole straight down like a rock, like it had been shot, just straight down. And it got about 1.5 feet off the ground and it came screaming across the road. And with its left wing, it brushed my left leg, brushed my blue jeans. I have no idea why. There was no reason. It certainly knew I was there. I hadn't threatened it. There was nothing going on. I have talked to a number of prominent birders and ornithologists since, and none of them can give me a scientific reason for it. So I have chosen to take it as a spiritual thing. It was the highlight of my 17 months. I believe that bird touched my leg on purpose for whatever kind of communication can happen between a bird and a human. Whether it was saying goodbye or hello or thanks for not bugging me or whatever. I flew across an open prairie. I spent the next 2.5 days looking for it, never saw it again. So that was my last thing, was that bird touching me and then flying off, which is why it wound up on the cover of the book. And I'm thrilled that it is. This was a shot taken the afternoon before. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous bird. Once again, the yellow and black eyes. It's just spectacular. And the book itself, like I mentioned, it covers all 53 birds. There's quite a few photographs in it. It's available on Amazon if you're at all interested. But it was a once in a lifetime thing for me. I want to mention two quick things before I go. I have a book coming out in spring of 27 called Why We Love Birds. I interviewed 52 birders from around the country, most of whom you guys are familiar with, the Ken Kaufmans and Cy Montgomerys and Debbie Shearwater and Chris Cooper and Pete Dunn, just the best birders in the country, and talked to them about birding and asked them all the same questions and had a blast. And because I enjoyed it so much, that's what led to doing the podcast, Naturally Scott. And I am having so much fun doing this podcast. And if you're interested in watching it, you can find it on all podcast platforms and you can find it on YouTube. This is the one favor I will ask. Lori and John, please forgive me. If you would go to YouTube and look up Naturally Scott and just hit subscribe, I would so much appreciate it. Every time somebody does that, YouTube pushes this out to more people and we get our story out there and more people get to hear about these things. And it's not just the birds, although it's more than half birds. It's marine mammals and redwood trees and insects and just great stuff. And so the more people that hear it, the better I think it is for nature and conservation, and the more guests I can bring in. So go to YouTube, go to Naturally Scott, click subscribe, and it will be a favor to me. Thank you. This is my email. If anybody has any questions, anything they want to send me after or in the next couple of days or whatever, please don't hesitate. Scott@naturallyscott.com. I would be happy to engage with you. This is the last slide. People ask me about my photography and if I have any rules. Um, again, I'm a new photographer, but this is my philosophy on birding photography. Is there are two things that I will do to a photograph when I'm in Lightroom. Number one, I will crop, and number two, I will do slight color adjustments. But that's it. So if there's a telephone wire that went in front of this hawk, I just wouldn't use the picture. I'm not saying other people should or shouldn't. I just don't. I want you to see what I saw. So when you're looking at this picture, that is a ferruginous hawk, which is one of the most beautiful of all of the Buteos. This is Pinnacles National Park. That is the color of the sky. It was sitting on that power pole that you're looking at there, that crossbeam, and there was that yellow sign that was on that crossbeam. However, this is the one picture that I modified and changed. In real life, that yellow sign says high voltage. I modified it to say thank you, which is what I want to say to each of you for having me here tonight, and allowing me into your homes and to share this adventure with you. And now I am thrilled to answer any and all questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Scott. What a lot of fun stories and beautiful photos. And
Oh,
yeah,
thank
so
you.
if anybody in the audience has questions for Scott, I can relay those. Either put them in the Q&A um, box or into the chat. I've got both of those open now, and we'll be happy to relay your question to Scott. So we'll wait a couple minutes here. I do have several comments from audience members saying, thank you, lots of fun stories and wonderful photos. The spirit animal is the northern hawk owl. That was a pretty cool encounter you had, Scott. And congratulations on your book, and thank you for this fun session. Um, and another participant said, thank you. I enjoyed your stories and I look forward to learning more on your YouTube channel. I'm new to birding, filled with so much excitement to learn. Cheers. Yeah,
Well,
okay.
thank you guys.
Um, the first question comes from an anonymous attendee. If you could choose again, would you still retire to South Carolina or would you choose somewhere with more raptors like Texas?
I would choose wherever my daughter takes my grandchildren. So my daughter, well, my son lives here in the guest house on the property, and my daughter lives just a short way away with her husband and both our grandchildren. So my choice of where to live, well, I could live wherever I wanted. If I want to live with my wife, I'm going to live here close to the children. So, yes, if it wasn't for that, and we could just kind of pick somewhere, I would. I would pick somewhere different. South Carolina is not a great birding state, and it's not a great mammal state. And those are the two things that I love. So, for me, it would probably be a coastal state so that I could have marine mammals as well as terrestrial. So, Washington, Oregon, California, Maine, the Outer Banks of North Carolina, those would be places I would consider.
Very good. Jeremy says, amazing presentation. I love the
Thank you.
stories behind the images, including people you met, stories, etc. And thank you for giving red-tailed hawks some love. Uh, do you have any stories to share about your interactions with Northern Harriers?
Yes, I do. And actually, I have one just from yesterday. So my brother moved out here just a little bit ago, which was a blessing for me. And so he and his wife and my son and I were taking a hike around a park. I love Northern Harriers. And we get a Northern Harrier out here every winter that comes out to the Starfort Park. And so we're hiking and we hadn't seen it yet this year. It hadn't been reported. And I said to my son, maybe today's the day with the Northern Harrier. And sure enough, we come around the far end of the lake and there's an open field. Who's ever asked about Northern Harriers knows that that's what Harriers like. And there it is. It's the same female Northern Harrier that's been here every year I've lived here. And it's quartering the field and it's just gorgeous. Just gorgeous. The one in the book that I wrote about was from Minnesota. There was an open field that had been quartering. I was doing an RV trip around the country. My wife and I RV'd for years, and this Northern Harrier, it was dusk, came out of the sun with this golden hue behind it and flew straight toward our RV as it came across this field and came well within 100 feet of us and then veered off and took off. And so that was the one that I chose to write about that day. And actually, I saw a great Northern Harrier in September in Rocky Mountain National Park at the very top of the mountains, up at the highest visitor center. There was a Northern Harrier up there that was competing with a red-tailed hawk. They were mobbing each other. So yeah, some great times with Northern Harriers. Thank you for asking.
Very good. David asks, curious how much advanced planning was required for your big year and what kind of changes happened to your plan as you went along?
A lot of planning was required. I did not do as much as I should have. Again, that was my ignorance. So I'm working on two books now. One's a pure birding book and one's half birds, half mammals. And I actually have all of my trips planned out from now until the end of 2027. I have at least one trip a month scheduled for the next 24 months. And I've done tremendous amount of research so that I don't replicate the winter owl screw up of the first season. Obviously, you do have to make some changes based on weather or some of the birds that are more challenging than others to find, like a gyrfalcon or a northern hawk or a hook-billed. So like the hook-billed, I had to make 4 trips to Texas before I got it. And on that 4th trip, I was trying to figure out how I was going to explain to my wife I needed to make a 5th trip down to Texas. So yeah, the weather and uncooperative birds change my plans, and they still do. I mentioned earlier I've got that trip coming out. I'll be in Washington the weekend you guys have your event. But before I get there, I'm going to Kalispell to study long-eared owls, then Idaho. I'm coming in there to see the bald eagles, and then I'm going down to Oregon to do the stellar sea lion chapter of the book. And then I'll go down to California and do Monterey Bay and stuff, which is an amazing birding and marine mammal place. So the best laid plans, I'm hoping it all comes together. That's what we've got booked. But I always hold out the idea that it may not work so that I'm not terribly disappointed. But you guys are going to tell me I will see bald eagles in January in Skagit Valley on the river, right?
I think you will.
Okay.
And Mary comments, you are a fabulous storyteller, and at the time you'll be in Skagit Valley, she believes you'll see snow geese and tundra swans too. So,
Oh, fantastic. I'm going looking for tundra swans in a couple weeks in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. They gather there by the thousands, so I'm looking forward to that. But I would
very
love to
good.
see that in snow geese. I can't wait to get to Skagit Valley. I'm so looking forward to it.
We have a question. What camera and lens did you use for these beautiful shots?
Well, thank you for the beautiful shot comment. And if somebody hadn't asked that, I've probably given this presentation 100 times. Yours would have been the first club to not ask. So I carry two when I'm out there. I carry a Sony A1 with a 200 to 600 lens, and then I carry a Sony A9 II with a 70 to 200 lens. Because you never know how close you're going to get to the birds, and because I like to shoot marine mammals or all mammals as well, I need a lens that can get me closer. And then there are just certain times where, like we just went on an African safari for a few weeks. There's not time. I'm not good enough to change lenses on the fly. I'll be shooting a goshawk that's 200 yards away, and then suddenly there's a lion 15 feet away from the Jeep. I just have to grab a separate camera. So that's what I use. Now, I will tell you, I believe Sony makes the best cameras. I say that, and I think the debate is silly, kind of like Ford and Chevy or Coke and Pepsi. I think Canon and Nikon and Olympus probably make cameras that are just as good. I just did a lot of research when I got into this, and that's where I went. But if somebody had said, "Hey, you know what? Here, let's go with Canon," yeah, it would have been just the same. So for me, that's what I do. I carry a pistol and a rifle, as my wife says, and have a blast.
All right. Teresa asks, did you see or do you see or study burrowing owls?
Yes, yes. The burrowing capital owl of the world is Cape Coral, Florida, on the west coast of Florida, down south of Sarasota, and they are all over the town. Um, as a matter of fact, the town has a thing where you put up 2-inch PVC pipes in 10-foot squares around the burrows. And my favorite place to go, and I've gone there a number of times to shoot them, is there's a little league field, and they burrow behind the outfield fence. And people are sitting out there watching the game, and they're in between burrowing owl nests. And as you're driving through the town, they're in the Meridian on the main street. They're in people's yards. They're all over. It's just fantastic. I've seen them in other places, but there's just something about the way they look and I'll be going down there to see them in February. It'll be the next time I'm down there. But there's just something about them. You can't go a half mile in Cape Coral, Florida without seeing a bunch of burrowing owls. And they're so used to people, you can get right up. They ask you to stay 10 feet away from the burrows. That's why they set the PVC pipes. But you can get right up to that 10-foot mark. And the burrows, they're just looking at you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We've seen you before. We know what cameras are. And off you go. Now, April and May, they're a little shyer because that's when they've got their babies. So, they're a little more protective. But if you ever get a chance, man, that's the place to go.
Excellent.
It's as
And
close as you'll get to a zoo.
wow, wow. And we have somebody who commented that the snow geese and eagles are already here in the Skagit and Still valleys. So they've already arrived for the
Well,
winter.
tell them to stay for 2 more months, please. I won't be there till the middle of January. I'd hate
Very
to have to write about Conowinga Dam in the book. I want to write about Skagit Valley.
good. All right. So I think that's all the questions that we have. Scott, I want to thank you again. It was a wonderful presentation. I
Oh,
really
you're very kind.
appreciate it. And yeah, it was excellent.
Well, thank
I
you.
do want to tell our participants that we won't be having a December program night. So the next event will be in January. And in closing, I just want to say thank you first to Scott, but also thank you to our members and friends for joining us tonight. We're really grateful to everyone who supports Eastside Audubon, and you make it possible. For us to bring you presentations such as this one. So happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and good night. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Have a great night, everyone.